Welcome back everybody. In this video I'm going to be discussing things to consider before making a huge GB Studio game. The reason why I'm making this is because I am making what you could say is a huge GB Studio game. The game I'm making, Take It Racing 2, has 446 scenes just for the cars. I haven't done it all yet. The game is at 1 megabyte file size. 4 megabytes is obviously the maximum. And if you don't know what GB Studio is, it's a game engine that lets you make Game Boy games without actually coding. It's a visual scripting game engine that you can export and play the games on the web, or you can play them on your actual Game Boy. So to begin, I'm going to start by saying what makes a game huge. And obviously I've just mentioned the amount of scenes in this game, and that is one thing that makes the game huge, but you can make the scenes very large, and that would mean that you could fill them with information, for example, actors, which are like characters, and you could then put scripts on those, for example, text and logic, and you could fill a scene with triggers and actors that are full of scripts, which would also make the game very large. But there are also things beyond just what we see in the engine that makes the game big. So for example, the time it takes to play the game. In one of my previous videos, I estimated how long it would take to play Take It Racing 2 in its completion and, do everything in the game. And it could be between 2 to 8 hours, depending on, how quick you're, like mashing the buttons to get through the game. And that obviously is a big part of what makes a huge game, because that will need to be tested. Every single thing you do will have to be tested to make sure that it works. And so it's not just about the game time, it's also about the story. So for example, if you have a lot of text, each of those text things will obviously need to be spell checked for grammar. And if you have multiple endings, you'll have to play the game multiple times in order to test the game fully. I will go over testing, that is my 5th point. And that is an important point when considering how big you make your GB Studio project. I'm just going to apologize that this isn't a very exciting thing to look at, but this is more of a discussion video. And I just want to be able to zoom in on things and show you what I mean as I go along. So we've discussed what makes a game huge. But now let's go into the actual points. I have 6 points, and the first 2 are questions, and the last 4 are things that affect how big the game is and your perception of them. So, number 1 is why. The reason the game will be better for making it huge. So, in this game, obviously, the size of the game really comes down to the amount of cars and also the amount of scenes that are dedicated towards the racetracks. Obviously, I did make a demo before and I have planned out how it will work, and I'm hoping that there will be around 264 scenes dedicated to just the racing, and then beyond that will be the menus, and hopefully it will fill that 4 megabytes. If it goes beyond that, I will have to scale down the game, and I have that planned, okay? So the question, why does making the game huge make it better? So, like I said, for me, it will be player choice. As the game progresses, the years go by, and you unlock more cars to buy and more championships and races to participate in. The more makes the game longer, basically have more value for money when you're playing the game. But that doesn't make the game better per se, but I have done the testing and I find it fun to buy cars, sell cars, and participate in new races. Honestly, my game benefits from seeing fresh things because the gameplay itself is quite repetitive. But it's not just about, the amount of scenes that we're looking at that make the game better. It will also be about the story. So if you're making your game huge, then it might be because there's a huge overarching story with things that you can do on the side quest and things. And that makes the game better by giving the player more things to do. And obviously, everything I'm saying should be taken with a grain of salt because I don't know your game and I don't know you and how you make your games. And I'm trying to pass on some wisdom that I have from basically spending so long making this game. I've been working on this game for over a year, and I want to make sure that you guys are aware of some of the challenges that I've faced so that you don't have to face them too. Or so that you can predict the challenges before they come so that you don't give up. So the second question is how? What is the way that you will make it possible? So just having an idea in your head is not enough to make a game successful or successfully make the game. For example, I was working on a game called Space Punk, where I had a huge idea for a massive world, multiple planets, and I only ever got around to making one planet, and it was very empty, and it was just like one city on the planet, and it just my actual idea for the game wasn't planned out enough, and that's what I'm trying to say here. So how will you make it possible? And obviously with this game, testing was the main thing, prototyping, planning. So I obviously made Take It Racing 1, which basically was the fundamentals of what I wanted to do in this kind of racing game and what was possible in GB Studio without having, pseudo 3D. And instead it was about upgrading your car slightly and then going into races and having the stats of the race be dependent on the track and your car, and the outcome was that. And obviously from that, people were like, why don't I have any choice in the race? So this is now choice in the race. And I made a demo, which obviously is on itch that you can play, which was in GB Studio 2. This is now in GB Studio 3. So I've had the time and the knowledge of my first demo to basically go back and fix everything that was wrong with that demo, make it really optimized so that I'm not wasting my own time. And I was able to then plan and think about each individual part of the game and then boil it down to what is necessary. And I removed a lot of things. For example, there was loads of car stats that were not used, or that were used but were overly complicating it and didn't matter at all. So I basically stripped them down, and I stripped back everything I didn't need, and I basically focused on what made it fun. Or I at least tried to, based on how people gave their feedback and how I wanted the game to be. So prototyping everything is extremely important. If you only do one part and then think, oh, I know how to do the rest, the likelihood is you do not know how to do the rest. And even if you do, the scale at which you'll be doing it will make it very difficult for you to actually play out. And do not be afraid to ask for help. There are people who have done this before or made large games before. For example, me, you can comment on this video and I'll try and reply. There is also the Discord that you can go into, the GB Studio Discord. I'll put a link for that in the description below. And also you can, go on the Reddit and ask questions, which I'll also put below as well for you guys. And if you're not in those things, I really recommend joining them. I'm not that active, but when I do go on there, I try to help when I can. Okay, so point number 3. This is going beyond the questions now. So let's say you've answered the first 2 questions. You know why making the game huge makes the game better, and you know how you're going to do it. You've done your prototyping and you've done your planning. The next point will be time. So how much time do you have to make your game? And not only that, as time goes on, you will get better at making the game and making games in general and how you want your game to be. And you'll probably have to go back to the start to think about how the game begins, for the players and all of the stats involved and everything. And you'll end up redesigning the game again, probably, because you've been on it for so long and you don't want it to be at the quality that you began and comparing it to the quality at the end, right? So time is a big factor in, making a huge game. This is assuming you're working on your own and you're not working on it every single day, right? If you're going to work on this full time, then time is a different factor than if you're working on it the weekends, a couple hours. But it still is a huge part, because even if you're going to work on this for a year like I have, a new release of GB Studio kind of threw a spanner in the works, but eventually it actually helped because I was able to rethink the game and use it as a positive thing to remake the game as optimized and as best for the player as possible. Time is like the fundamental part of creativity, right? If you don't have the time to do something, then you're either not going to do it the way you wanted to, or you're not going to get to do it at all. So definitely keep in mind time when you're making a huge game. There will be a point that you can say, right, this is it. For example, I released a demo of the game, and that was fundamental to making the game better. My 4th point, which goes on from time, is motivation/determination. So do you have it in you to continue working on the project? For example, like I said, I've been working on this for over a year, and the thing that keeps me coming back is the fact I have a plan, the fact that I've tested, the fact I know what is going to happen. If I didn't know what I was doing, then it would be extremely hard for me to basically push myself, to be determined to every day work a bit on this game and keep pushing it out there, right? If I didn't have the determination, then I wouldn't be making the game and it would have died already, right? Which is what happened with some games of mine in the past. So you have to want to work on the game and have the time and motivation to work on it. And that's how a lot of huge projects basically die, especially when you're working on it on your own, is that you didn't plan or test beforehand. It's a huge project and it just goes out of hand. You didn't plan for any of this and it all just falls apart. So definitely motivation and determination are a huge part, but they are dependent on planning and prototyping, okay? So it's not just in your own brain. You have to, get this down on paper and think about what is necessary. And it's okay to, change it as you go, of course. But I will get to that on the 6th point. Okay, so the 5th point, though, is testing. And testing is a huge part. With this game, currently, with the... Hold on, we can have a look at how many scenes there are by pressing S, creating a scene. And whatever scene number this is how many scenes I currently have, -1. So 310 scenes in this game currently. Currently, it takes at least half an hour to build the game. Like, if I press play right now, it will take half an hour to have the game ready to play. And it might take less time, if I did it again afterwards. But it does still take a long time. And this is because it's having to compile everything and create basically the file to then run it for you. But my point is, if you have a bug and you want to test it quickly, how are you going to do that if it takes half an hour to test, right? So the bigger your game becomes in GB Studio, the more difficult it is to work quickly, okay? So having that plan is really important because it means that you can work on a small chunk in order to prototype it. And then once that prototype has been, solidified, you can then scale up and you will already have the, stuff to rely on it. And for example, with the 223 cars, obviously this is the dealer and I haven't gone through all of them yet, but when you buy a car, it sets the stats of the car. And I forgot to add the region to the car. The region is important because some races require you to have a car of a certain region. And I had done about 20 cars before I realized that I needed to set this region. So imagine if I'd done all 223 and then realized I needed to add a region to each car. It would mean that I would have to go through 223 cars again to add a variable, which is insane, right? That is a lot of work, and by testing in small chunks and then scaling up, it can really increase the efficiency. And imagine if I didn't test at all the entire game because it took so long to build, and then at the very end I test and I find all of these bugs, and I'd have to go through 100 times because it doesn't work. And then when I fix one problem, I press play again and it doesn't work again. And imagine each one of these testing and pressing plays takes 40 minutes compared to, let's say, 5 minutes of the prototype I originally made. So you really need to make sure you've prototyped and tested before scaling up massively, because you will have to go back almost definitely because of the way that bugs just happen. You can't foresee every single bug, okay? And that's just part of it. And you also can't foresee every part of design. And this is the 6th point about agility. Agility is the idea that you can pivot your design as you go and make informed decisions based on feedback and your own testing. For example, let's say with these cars, if I did want to, let's say I didn't have that region number before and I wanted to add it, on a small scale, that's very easy. Like with the 20 cars, I could easily copy and paste this 20 times. And it would only take, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, depending on how long it takes me to copy and paste and, figure out where it needs to go and figure out the value for it. And that's not that bad, but you scale that up to 220 and it's crazy. So agility is the idea that you can make small changes quickly. But as your project gets bigger and bigger and bigger, those small changes become very hard to pull off quickly. And the annoying thing is as well, you would want to test the outcome of it too, and then maybe even revert it back to the original. So thinking about that and like knowing how to go about testing and changing small details is a very important part. And agility, especially when you're working on games on your own, is extremely important because most of us aren't professionals, or if we are, we haven't got the years of experience under our belt of being a designer, a programmer, a developer, an artist, a musician, all of those things mixed together. It can become very unwieldy to have all of this information right in front of our faces like this. And that's another thing of why the motivation is important, why the testing, the time, you know, the how and the why. If you don't have those how and the why, then it will fall apart because you're not ready, you know what I mean? So that was the 6 points that I came up with of things to consider before making a huge GB Studio game. I'm really hoping that that was illuminating. I'm sorry it wasn't a very interesting video, but I hope that my voice and the points I was bringing up were valuable to you. If you have any questions, please leave them below. I will be happy to answer anything in the comments. If you want to play the demo to the game, obviously it was made in GB Studio 2. There'll be a link in the description. There's also an Instagram page where I post images of the cars almost every day. I'll put my patrons up on screen. Thank you very much to you guys. You guys is the best. Remember to like the video if you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and please let me know what you want to see next, or especially what you thought of this video. My patrons did vote on a tutorial, and I will be trying to make that next week. I'm doing some preparation and some planning already. But I really hope this video was illuminating to those of you who maybe were thinking about making a huge GB Studio game, and hopefully this has made you think about the implications of that specifically. And yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.